Welcome to Momentum's virtual training series, where we invite expert facilitators to share their knowledge on topics that advance women in leadership.
Vitale, you're one of them. Thank you so very much for everything you've done for not just women, but for people overall to make sure that they're staying healthy and that they're giving their best without trying to give into our fears and everything. So I'm just going to pass it off to you and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I am really excited. Let me get everything up. I'm excited to talk about trust and to dive deep into trust today. All right. So I'm gonna give you the tools today so that you can become a trust catalyst for your organization. And I'm a big believer that yes, I can equip leaders to create environments of trust and to be more trustworthy. But also the culture has to become a more trustworthy and trust embracing environment. So we're going to talk about how to create cultures of trust. And then I'm also going to give you practical tips to become a trust catalyst for your organization. So I get this a lot. It's sort of like, well, what comes first, Vitale? It's like the chicken or the egg. Is it trust or is it culture? And I'm a big believer, you can't have culture without trust, right? You can't have strong culture. You can have words on a wall, you can have values, you can have principles, but you truly can't have a culture, a strong culture, a healthy culture without trust. And so, my ethos is that culture is your company's operating system and it cannot function without trust. Also, the reason that I've become an expert and so passionate about building trust in an organization really started with my journey of being a perfectionist researcher and perfection expert. So I own my own leadership company, and a lot of the work I do is helping leaders overcome perfectionism and also help cultures become cultures of excellence instead of perfectionism. And so I've led 2 university research studies on the impact of perfectionism in the workplace.
Yes.
And as I did more research on the impact of perfectionism in the workplace, I uncovered the fact that you can't have a high trust workplace and a high perfection workplace. It's one or the other, right? You either have a culture of perfectionism or you have a culture of trust. And so as I've done the work to eradicate perfectionism, I've naturally started doing the work to help organizations be trust catalysts. And so what I found is that, again, you can't have perfectionism and trust. It's one or the other. And so we have to choose as leaders and as organizations. So I want to share a little bit about my research around perfectionism that led me to trust, and then we're going to dive deep into trust. So my research showed that 92% of people struggle with some form of perfectionism. And if any of you all have heard my trainings in the past, most of them focus heavily on overcoming perfectionism and how we do that, how we overcome that as leaders. But if 92% of people struggle with some form of perfectionism, it shows up in our workplaces. People don't know if they want to stay at the organization, right? So it's impacting retention. It impacts, people are afraid of failure and fear of making a mistake. People are experiencing burnout. And 91% of leaders believe that perfectionism is impacting their employees' ability to get things done. Now, the most important piece of research, which is not on the screen, showed that 85% of cultures had cultures of perfectionism. 85% of organizations had cultures of perfectionism. And what that said to me was that 85% of organizations had cultures of low trust. Because remember, you can't have a perfectionist environment and a high trust environment. It's one or the other. And so that is what's led me naturally to this journey of high trust. So I want to just talk about the state of trust. And this isn't an opportunity to condemn organizations or condemn what we're doing. This is an opportunity for us to do something differently and tangibly start building trust, because trust is an action, right? It's a verb. It's something we consistently do. And so let's just kind of start like, what is the state of trust currently? 85% of organizations have cultures of low trust. Not by intent, but by default. 58% of employees would trust a stranger over their boss. Would trust a stranger over their boss. So again, how do we become trust catalysts? So this statistic no longer exists. And then 61% of workers say that low trust impacts their ability to get their work done. So is the most important piece of the culture puzzle. It is the most important piece of the workplace puzzle. And it's hard to focus on because it can seem so intangible. So today, my goal is to make it tangible for you. Also, some data when we're going back and talking to our leaders and trying to get buy-in for focusing on trust. Oftentimes it's like, well, how does it impact the bottom line, Vitale? So I want you all to think about trust and mistrust. And one thing I find that's really interesting, you all, is that mistrust is the most expensive thing on your income statement. Because think about it. When there's mistrust, we put controls into place. We have redundancies. We put software into place. I've even seen an organization, so just an example of this, of mistrust being expensive, is I had a client and they had someone performing a role and she had never received the right performance coaching, right? They had never leaned into building that trust, doing the right performance coaching, and she wasn't performing at her best. She also had no guidance. So instead of leaning in and having the hard conversations with her, they decided to invest in a $75,000 software that would help her do her job better. So again, mistrust is the most expensive thing. And if we think that, oh, that organization is the outlier, my organization isn't like that, it shows up in organizations in so many different ways. And so just an opportunity for us to do things differently. And here's just a fun little graphic showing the difference between an organization that has low trust and perfectionism versus an organization that has high trust and excellence. So I'm going to give you all the tools today so that you can spend your time with Kermit. That is my goal. 85% of the time, we're going to be jiving with Kermit. And so you all are going to get those tools today to become trust catalysts for your organization. So now let's do some background. So we're going to talk about why trust, why psychological safety, why is it important? And then I'm going to give you the tools. And I'd love to have some engagement and group sharing, and we'll do that throughout our remainder of our time together today. So many of you all may have heard of Project Aristotle, but this is the background, the framework for why psychological safety, why trust. So Google, as an organization, did a study in 2013 to answer the question, what makes their teams high performing? And they did this study on their organization as a whole. They wanted to know, out of their thousands and thousands of employees, like, what makes our teams high performing? Because they obviously wanted to replicate that formula to make their lower performing teams higher performing. And they had all these different things that they were looking at, right? Behavioral approach, team size, group incentives, past experience. And they had even all these different hypotheses, right? The number of high performers on a team, introverts versus extroverts, cross-disciplinary teams. So they had all these different things that they were thinking would make their teams high performing. They interviewed 180 of their teams. They did 201 one-on-one interviews. And they ran the study 35 plus times because they were so shocked at the answer. They were like, there's no way this is what makes a high-performing team. Like this, there's no way. Run it again, run it again. And so they did. And what they found is that the number one indicator of a high-performance team is psychological safety. Not results, not introverts versus extroverts, not the number of high producers on a team, but psychological safety. All right, so this idea of trust. And again, the reason I do this is because perfectionism and psychological safety, perfectionism and trust cannot coexist. And I want us to get on the same page about what psychological safety is. And I believe that psychological safety and trust are in the same family. Right, psychological safety is a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So this is the official definition by the woman who coined the term. Her name is Dr. Amy Edmondson, and she coined this term in 2010. And when I'm talking about interpersonal risk-taking, you all, I'm talking about people feeling like they can admit that they made a mistake, they can ask for help, they can speak up in meetings. So that's the definition of interpersonal risk-taking. Now, let me just emphasize again the why behind this. And this is one of my favorite quotes that gets to the heart of why trust is so important, why psychological safety is so important. And this is a quote by Adam Grant, and it's, the harder you make it to voice problems, the harder it becomes to solve them. It's impossible to fix what you don't know is broken. So think about it. If we create environments of psychological safety and trust, if we become trust catalysts, if we create a culture of trust catalysts, then people feel safe to admit the mistakes or voice problems, and then we can solve them. Otherwise, we can't because people are too afraid. So it's so important. Again, we can't fix what we don't know is broken. And so this impacts our people. This is that kind of people first approach, and this impacts our bottom line. Now, I also want to tell you about a study that Amy Edmondson did that speaks further to psychological safety, because I just want to lay the groundwork for the importance of trust and psychological safety, and then we'll get the tools. So you all, Amy Edmondson did a study on healthcare systems. And so these were hospitals. And she went into the study thinking that the high performance or the psychologically safe teams within these hospital systems made less mistakes. That was her hypothesis. High performing team, less mistakes. After she did a very thorough study, and the article on it is super interesting, and I can send it out for those of you who are interested, she found the opposite is true. The psychologically safe teams actually made more mistakes. But I want you to think about that. It's not that the psychologically safe teams actually made more mistakes, it's that the psychologically safe teams felt safe to report mistakes. The unsafe teams made just as many mistakes, but they weren't talking about it because they didn't want to get in trouble. And if we're talking about a hospital system, those mistakes are oftentimes life or death mistakes, right? They impact human lives. So further evidence of the importance of psychological safety. Now, when we have this psychological safety and trust, right, team members just are more likely to ask for help, right? They're going to admit mistakes. They're going to try on new roles and take risks, share more ideas. There's going to be more equal airtime in meetings. And what I mean by this is when you go into a meeting, is it the usual one or two suspects that are always talking? Or is there more collective intelligence and collective sharing? If there's more collective sharing, that is an indicator that there's higher trust because they feel safe to talk. When there's psychological safety presence, the relationships are stronger. So people are checking in on others. There's a natural environment of giving and receiving feedback and managing conflict, right? There's a language and ease to it because they've all been skilled at it and given the tools to practice it. And they have fun at work, right? We spend 80% of our lives working. So fun would be like a must-have, not just a nice to have. So let's have fun at work. And just, again, some other things to think about when it comes to the importance of psychological safety and trust, right? Team members feel comfortable being themselves. They're going to share their thoughts and opinions, which means you're going to be more innovative. They're going to engage in open and honest communication. They're going to trust that their ideas will be heard and respected. And again, they feel safe for that interpersonal risk-taking, like the speaking up and the asking questions and the making mistakes without this kind of fear of reprisal or judgment. So just speaking, again, to the importance of it. Now, Google, when they did this study in 2013, the higher ups were like, yeah, this psychological safety stuff kind of seems kumbaya, like, does it actually impact how much money we make as an organization? And they were like, yes, it does. Hold on. And so they looked at the sales teams at Google as part of this Project Aristotle. And what they found is that the sales teams that were psychologically safe beat their sales targets by 17%. And the teams that did not have psychological safety fell below their annual sales targets by 19%. So further proof, right? Mistrust is the most expensive line item on your expense report or income statement. And then also these sales teams fell below their sales targets by 19%, the ones that were psychologically unsafe. Now, a lot of organizations are like, how do I measure it? So my organization, we actually have assessments to measure psychological safety and trust. However, Amy Edmondson put together 10 questions to kind of start measuring it. So you can use those 10 questions as a starting point for yourself. And these are I did put 2 slides together, 5 questions on each. And these are some of the questions to measure psychological safety. Right? When something goes wrong, we work as a team to find a systemic cause. We value outcomes more than outputs or inputs, and nobody needs to look good. Right? On this team, I understand what is expected of me. It's interesting because I do these trust catalyst trainings and in-depth culture work around trust within organizations. And there are 2 questions that have presented the most opportunity for growth for companies. And it's the bottom right one right here. It says, if I make a mistake on this team, it's never held against me. So this is one that people oftentimes don't feel a lot of unease about. They're like, yeah, that's not true for my team. Like if I make a mistake, it's held against me. Right? Maybe not directly, but in the subconscious, it's there. It's held against me. And then the other one that shows up a lot when I'm teaching this stuff and working on culture change is the bottom left one. It is safe for me to take a risk on this team. So as leaders, think about how we're normalizing failure. Think about how we're talking about failure, how we're promoting risk taking, how we frame it, what we do when a risk doesn't work out, and how we're talking about it. So these are all, again, just opportunities to do things different. And here are some of the other questions. Also, if you Google Amy Edmondson's 10 questions to measure psychological safety, these will pop up. Right? Nobody on this team would deliberately act in a way that undermines my efforts. Members of this team never reject others for being different. No one's left out. But yes, you could use this and use kind of a Likert scale of 1 to 5 to measure this. So just another opportunity for kind of saying, like, what is our starting point? Where do we want to begin in our trust journey organizationally? Now, before we talk about the specific tools to measure trust, I want to play this quick video on the importance of trust in the workplace.
Plus, I just think this is really interesting. So I've worked with the Navy SEALs, and I asked them, like, how do you pick like the guys that go on SEAL Team 6, right? Because they're the best. And they drew a graph for me. And on one side, they wrote the word performance, and on the other side, they wrote the word trust. The way they define the terms is performance on the battlefield and performance off the battlefield. So this is your skills. Did you make your quarterly earnings, whatever, however you want to translate it, right? Performance, it's traditional. This is, how are you off the battlefield? What kind of person are you? The way they put it is, I may trust you with my life, but do I trust you with my money and my wife? They're SEALs. This is what they told me. Nobody wants this person, the low performer of low trust, of course. Of course, everybody wants this person, the high performer of high trust, of course. What they learned is that this person, the high performer of low trust, is a toxic leader and a toxic team member. And they would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes even a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over this person. This is the highest performing organization on the planet, and this person is more important than this person. And the problem in business is we have lopsided metrics. We have 1,000,001 metrics to measure someone's performance and negligible to no metrics to measure someone's trustworthiness. And so what we end up doing is promoting or bonusing toxicity in our businesses, which is bad for the long game because it eventually destroys the whole organization. The irony is it's unbelievably easy to find these people. Go to any team and say, who's the asshole? And they will all point to the same person. Equally, if you go to any team and say, who do you trust more than anybody else? Who's always got your back? And when the chips are down, they will be there with you. They will also all point to the same person. It's the best gifted natural leader who's creating an environment for everybody else to succeed. And they may not be your most individual highest performer. But that person, you better keep them on your team.
I love that so much because it's so true, right? In organizations, we have all the measures for performance, and none of the measures for trust. And if trust and psychological safety are the number one indicators of high performance team, if it's the missing the puzzle piece for successful cultures, it's an opportunity to start creating metrics and how you want to build trust. And we will start talking about that framework today. Now, before I go into the different tactics and tips for becoming a trust catalyst, I'd love to just hear from you all. What's standing out the most so far? You can put in your chat box or you can unmute. Like, what's standing out the most? Is it some of the data? Is it that mistrust is the most expensive item on your income statement? But I'd love to just hear from you all. What is standing out the most? Unmute, chat box. It's much more fun when I'm not the only one talking. Yeah, the statistics, Shannon, yeah, that we don't measure trust. Yeah, the different data points. Yeah, there are a few ways to measure trust, but so many ways to measure performance, the data, the cost of mistrust. So now let's talk about how trust is eroded. Before we talk about how it's built, hold on, excuse me. Before we talk about the importance of trust and how we build, or not the importance, but how we build trust, let's talk about how trust is eroded. And Jonathan, yes, thank you for your comment. The value that trust and empathy plays in the workplace and how it impacts overall numbers. Yes. And then Jill, yep. How much time and dollars are wasted due to a lack of trust turnover? Yep. So let's talk about how trust is eroded. Now, I think oftentimes when we think about trust, we're like, oh yeah, it's big moments when trust is broken. You all know. Trust is eroded in small moments, right? There's this foundation and then we do things and trust, the foundation starts to crack. And so I've just got 10 ways that trust is eroded and I'm going to go over them, but I'd love to know ones that you would add to this. I'd also love to know which one of the 10 are like the trust eroders for you. All right, so lack of follow through is a way that trust is eroded. And this is, again, kind of this interpersonal trust that we're talking about. It's when you blindside a team member. It's when you undermanage someone, right? You don't give them enough direction. It's when you don't take a genuine interest in others. It's when you don't recognize others. You all, the Best Places to Work Institute did a study of 3 million people, so a very substantial sample size. Right, 3 million people, and ask them what motivates you to come to work every day aside from what you get paid. So let's take money off the table. Like, what motivates you to come to work every day? And I think 35% said being recognized. Right, so the importance of recognition. Other ways that trust is eroded, right? Sharing confidential information, micromanaging, right? The opposite of undermanaging. When we reward bad behavior, when we show up inconsistently, or our policies and how they're implemented are inconsistent, we don't manage our intensity. So I'd love to just know, when we don't listen to people, that's not on this list, but when we're not present and we're not listening, that's a way that trust is eroded. When we're constantly rescheduling our one-on-ones with our team members, trust is eroded because we are indirectly telling them that we don't value their time. So I'd love to just hear in the chat box, which ones of these stand out the most for you? Yep, thank you, Amy. Yeah, constant lateness, dropping the ball, not doing what you said you do on time. Not addressing concerns in real time. Andrea, thank you for bringing it up. That is a big one, right? When someone expresses a concern, or there's many people in the organization expressing a concern and we don't address it in a timely manner, major trust eroder. Yeah, inconsistency, micromanaging, not being genuine. Yes, rewarding bad behavior and not valuing time. So as we think about, and you all were humans, so we are going to do some of these things, right? They're going to happen. But the idea is, are we building more trust? Are there more trust deposits happening in the relationship bank account than trust withdrawals? All right, that's the important piece of this. Yep, change without communication. Awesome. Okay, now let's talk about how to build trust. So we're going to talk about two kind of pieces of trust today. I'm going to talk about how to build cultural trust. And then we're going to talk about specific tactics for you individually to become a trust catalyst for your organization. Because there are both pieces of the equation. Right? I can arm leaders to become a trust catalyst, but if the culture in which they are operating doesn't isn't trust inducing, then it's not going to be as successful. It's not going to be as sustainable. So you really need both pieces of the puzzle. So we're going to talk about trust tenets, and we're going to talk about this formula T3. So let's talk about trust tenets. And this is about cultural trust and how we build trust culturally. You can also start, if you are the head of a department, you can start with your department. How do I build trust within my department? So it's about, determining trust tenets, how they're going to be expressed, and what currently doesn't align. But what I want to share with you is how this started. So I coach a VP at an energy company in Houston. And we were having conversations in January this year. And she was like, Vitale, she was like, trust is really low on my team. She was like, I mean, I don't have data to back it up, but it just is. We've had a lot of change. We've had, a lot of people in and out our department. And again, it's an energy company. So, hurricanes, all of those things kind of change the dynamics. And she's like, we are really low trust. And she has 5 managers that report to her, then like a layer of 20 other people leaders and 300 people in her department, just so you can get size. And this is a multiple thousand person company, but her department is about 350 people. She's like, what do we do? And I was like, okay, well, let's create trust tenets for your department of 350 people. And so what we did is we identified 5 trust tenets, and she's allowed me to share this story. So that's why I have her trust tenets on the slide. She's given me her permission. And we identified 5 trust tenets. And the 5 that we chose are on the screen, and I'll go over them. And what we did for each 5, you all, is we identified the 4 to 5 behaviors that each team member needed to exhibit to live that trust tenet. So what are the things that team members need to do to be transparent, be consistent, right? Be competent, and, be living in integrity, to be caring. So we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page. And then we also identified, what are some of the current obstacles happening culturally that might get in the way of us living these values? And what she started doing was she started talking about them. She launched them first, obviously company-wide, and she went from managers to supervisors, and then the supervisors were responsible for spreading it to their teams and the whole 300. But what they started doing as an organization is talking about it at every team meeting, recognizing people, and then even incentivizing people. So they have an internal reward system called Energize You, where you can put dollars into people's kind of Energize You bank accounts where they can buy company gear, gift cards. And so those dollars went straight to rewarding people for living the trust tenets. And so it's something that they have been doing. We launched it in February, and it has been going so successfully. And it's been so powerful to watch. The supervisors embrace it. They've been having breakout meetings to talk about it. They've got it plastered on their walls. And it's been much more successful than I could have ever dreamed of. But it's because they were intentional about it. So this is how we develop cultural trust, just like values. If trust is that important, what are our trust tenets? What are our trust pillars? What are our trust values? Also, she was extremely intentional about the words that she chose. They were at a very base level of trust, you all. They had basically a trust score of 0. And so they needed to start with some of the basics of trust, right? Being transparent, being consistent, being competent in your role. And so they were starting at a base level of trust. The goal is in 18 months that we graduate to another level of trust tenets, right? Once we've developed these, let's develop the next. Once we have these down. So it's been really cool to watch. She was also really thoughtful with the words. So for example, the bottom one is caring. And we were trying to decide between the word empathy and caring for a trust tenet. Well, most of the people on her 350 person team are engineers. And the word caring resonates more with them than empathy. And so we chose caring just because we wanted to get the best result. So just being thoughtful about where you start. So these trust tenets are something you can start with your team, but also organizationally. It's just a way for everyone, kind of the trust tenets that everyone wants to live by. You can even create specific metrics, right? Those trust metrics for each of these as well. And you can measure them. So what I want you all to do really quickly is think about your team. And my client chose 5, but I really wanted her to choose 4. So let's choose 4 trust tenants. So I'm just going to give you all a moment, like reflect and just think about your team and your department or your organization. And I want you to think about like what would I love for our 4 trust tenants to be? And remember, be realistic. You want some of them to be aspirational, but not too aspirational, right? What do I want your trust tenants to be? So just take a moment and think about them. And I would love for you to put these in the chat box. Like, what are your 4 trust tenants? Yep. So Barbara, thank you for that. Yeah. Learning, accountability. Oh, hold on, everyone's moving. Sorry. Learning, motivation, listening, empowerment. Heather, you have integrity, accountability, authenticity, encouragement, transparency, integrity, accountability, innovation, appreciation. Yeah. So loving these. So then let's take it a step further, right? So you've got the 4, and let's start brainstorming. Like, what are the things that you want? Like, what are the ways, like, what are the behaviors that are going to allow you to live that value? Right. So this column on the left is how are you going to live that value? And then the column C on the right is what's going to get in the way of me living this value? So I've just got some examples for you to think about. Take it or leave it. So for transparency, what are some things that we could do? What are some behaviors we could have to be more transparent as leaders? Right? We could work on explaining the why behind our decisions. We could practice being open and vulnerable with our team, right? Professional vulnerability. We can make sure we're providing clarity around expectations, being honest about challenges, making sure we're sharing the knowledge, right? That we're not working in silos and kind of hoarding our information. So that's a way to be transparent. What might get in the way of us being transparent? So having an irregular one-on-one meeting schedule, providing like not having a good kind of feedback rhythm with our employees. So not being as thoughtful with feedback or as consistent with feedback. Ineffective performance reviews are going to get in the way of us being transparent, because part of transparency is people knowing how they're performing. So again, a way to live transparency could be, beefing up your performance review process, right? And I'm not talking about, I know that probably every organization on this call has their company has a formal performance review process, and performance reviews are done the 4th quarter or 2nd quarter, or whatever it is. But I'm talking about the conversations between those conversations that need to happen. Things that would not promote transparency would be using the compliment sandwich. We don't love that one, where you say something nice, deliver the bad news, and then say something else nice. Really, that's just for us, not for the person who needs to receive the information. Not communicating about internal changes, not following through on our commitments. So just some ways that like, what would get in the way of us being more transparent? What ways could we be more transparent? And then let's think about another one, caring, empathy. How can we practice being more empathetic? Right. So practicing active listening. So you could have a policy, for example, in team meetings that technology isn't allowed in the meetings, right? No phones, no computers, right? We're present with each other. We're going to be active listeners. Maybe in your one-on-ones, you have a policy, no phones, like no distractions. Making sure you're practicing recognition and gratitude. So I'm a big fan of the idea of the relationship bank account, and making sure you are making deposits into your team members' relationship bank accounts. It could be remembering a work anniversary, a birthday, checking in on someone. How was your mom's surgery last week? Again, showing genuine interest in others, having a no gossip policy. And then, what could get in the way of us being a caring, empathetic team? Like not prioritizing relationships, not making deposits into people's relationship bank accounts, being distracted in meetings, right? Not listening, not being present, getting off track, not being consistent with your one-on-one meetings, not respecting work-life boundaries. Like if we are saying as an organization, you know what, We really want to respect your work-life boundaries. We want you to be present with your family when you get off work, but yet as a leader, we're sending emails at 9 p.m. We might want to rethink that, right? Not responding to concerns in a timely manner. I think someone said that earlier, is something that erodes trust. So for each of your trust tenets, you want to think about what are the specific behaviors, and be really specific behaviors that we as a team need to be doing and living to live this trust tenet, because people are going to define words in different ways. And then let's think about the current climate. Like, what might get in the way of us not living this trust tenet? So this is a way that you would develop team trust, cultural trust, organizational trust, is by defining your trust tenets and really leaning in and going all in on trust. And I love seeing everyone's words. Yeah, Jonathan, empowerment, development, compassion, inclusivity. Michael, integrity, dependability, teamwork. Lori, integrity, respect, appreciation, supportiveness. So again, it's fun to see what everyone else's words are. And so again, 4 trust tenets. And then for each of those trust tenets, identify what are the behaviors, and then what are some of the obstacles that might prevent us from living these trust tenets. So now let's talk about how we as individuals on this call can become trust catalysts. So we had the kind of organizational work, and you guys, we are covering this at a much faster pace than I do when I do my deeper training. So just FYI, this is a much like kind of a bird's eye view of this content. So T3 is a formula I use to help people become trust catalysts. And what I mean about T3, you all, is I believe there are 3 lanes of trust. So three different lanes. The first lane is me, the me lane of trust. And what I mean by that is, what are we doing as individuals? What am I doing to be trustworthy? That is the me lane of trust. Like, how am I showing up as a trust catalyst? The next lane of trust is one-on-one. Like, what are you doing to build trust one-on-one with your colleagues, your direct reports, your peers, your boss? What are you doing to build trust one-on-one? And then the final lane of trust is we. So how am I creating, again, this is kind of in the same vein as the trust tenets, but how am I creating an ecosystem where trust thrives? So think about me, one-on-one, and we. So what I'm going to do is, in the following slides, I'm going to give you like 5 or 6 ways that you can build, like practical ways that you can build trust in each of these lanes. When I do deeper trainings, I have like 15 to 20 different ways you can for each of these, but I didn't want to overwhelm us today. So we're going to stick with 5 and just choose the one or ones that resonate with you. All right. So just choose the one or ones that resonate with you. So let's talk about the me lane of trust. What am I doing to be consistent and be a trust catalyst? So the first is just being someone who is consistent and reliable. So there was a national survey done of about trust, and it asked, like, what's the most important word that you would associate with trust? And the word reliable, and this was a study of thousands of people, the word reliable was the word that people associated most with someone who is trustworthy, someone who's reliable. And I would say that people choose reliable because reliable is like something you can actually see. Right? Reliable is like an action. It's a verb, right? Someone is being reliable. But being reliable, right? Doing what you say you're going to do. Another way to build me lane of trust is if say I'm a new leader on my team, or maybe I am new in a specific area of expertise. It might be that at this time of your career, building credibility is what you need to be doing. And if you're new on your team, building credibility for you might be building relationships with the people on your team. So you need to prove that you're a trustworthy person. So building those relationships. If it's a subject matter, it could just be getting more experience, more credentials. Proving your experience might be something that would show your credibility, but that is something to build trust. Another way that I love is renegotiating deadlines. How often, you all on this call, I'd say probably all of us are going to raise our hands. How often do we overcommit to deadlines? Or what I like to call, we set people-pleasing deadlines, right? Someone's like, hey, Vitale, when can you get that to us by? And I'm like, oh, I'll get it to you end of day tomorrow. And silently, I'm dying. I'm like, what just came out of my mouth? I couldn't stop the words from my people-pleasing tendencies, right? And so we overcommit, we set people-pleasing deadlines, and then what happens? Sometimes we miss the deadline. We don't follow through on our commitment because on the front end, we were people pleasing. And so I love when people renegotiate deadlines. Like there is nothing I love more than when one of my team members comes to me and says, Vitale, I was overly ambitious with this timeline commitment. Can we extend the deadline by 2 days? Because what that says to me is she knows the project's important. She knows that we need to get it done. And she wants to be realistic about the deadline. We also, obviously, we are a training organization, so we do a lot of work around personal growth and awareness and development. But I even go back to clients sometimes and I'm like, I was overly ambitious when I committed to that deadline. Would it be okay if I get it to you on Friday instead of tomorrow? And more times than not, it's okay, but just you're allowed to renegotiate your deadline. Also, another good question to ask that is trust building versus judgment creating is asking in a meeting, like, could you tell me what I'm missing? Like when we ask someone, what do you think? We're asking for their judgment. And it doesn't build trust. And also, if they don't trust us yet, they're probably not going to give us true feedback. But if we ask, could you tell me what I'm missing? It invites in real feedback and it's trust building. You're actually probably going to get real answers versus, judgment, getting judgment. And then finally, another way to build me trust is becoming an active listener. And saying that we're going to be an active listener 24/7 is not realistic, you all, but are there moments, micro moments of presence that you could do in your day to be more of an active listener? So for me, I know that in my one-on-one meetings with my direct reports, I need to be present. And so I remove distractions. I also know in certain client meetings, I need to be very present. And so I remove distractions, but I don't have this unattainable idea that I'm going to be present 24/7. So I'd love to hear from you all. Either unmute yourself or in the chat box. Which of the me lane of trust catalyst tips do you want to put into practice? Which of these do you like the most? Yeah, renegotiating deadlines. Yeah, could you tell me what I'm missing? Renegotiate, yeah. And again, the renegotiating deadlines is so easy and it helps me with manage my people-pleasing tendencies. All right, so now let's talk about the second lane of trust, which is the one-on-one lane of trust. This is what you're doing to build trust one-on-one with your direct reports, with who you report to, with your peers and colleagues. So this is, vertical and horizontal trust. So the first is delegation, right? We know this, but delegation is truly a trust. When it's done right, it is a trust builder, because if you are delegating to the people that report to you, you're saying, hey, I know I'm invested in your growth in our company. I'm invested in where you want to go. And I know that you want a promotion in 18 months. And for you to get a promotion in 18 months, you need to take on these tasks. And so I want to prepare you for that, right? It's an act of trust. Also, recognition and gratitude. And so think about creating a system for yourself. So there is a CEO of an organization, and what he does is he puts 3 quarters on his desk. And his goal is to give 3 pieces of recognition every single day. And when he does it, he turns a quarter over. And it's a physical marker for him to give recognition and genuine recognition, right? Just expressing interest in someone, checking in on somebody. So really more of this kind of relationship bank account deposit, checking in on somebody. How was your mother's surgery? Expressing gratitude. But he has a goal of doing that 3 times a day for different team members, right? Not the same, but 3 different pieces of recognition or gratitude. And so that is his kind of system and goal. Making sure that you're practicing empathy and showing empathy to your team members. Another question that I love to ask that builds trust is, would you like another perspective? Because how often so there's this book, it's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's the 20 leadership habits to start or to stop doing. Sorry, 20 leadership habits to stop doing. And one of the leadership habits to stop doing is adding too much value. And that's something that I have been totally guilty of. I'll have a team member come to me and they pitch an idea. And then I'm like, oh, but what about this? And what about doing that? Like, I'm adding all this value. But you know what happens when we add value to someone else's idea? It's no longer their idea. And you know what happens when it's no longer their idea? They no longer have ownership of it. And so for me, I like to just simply ask, would you like another perspective? Right? Kind of living by this, idea of like only give advice when asked. So that's a rule that I live by with my mother, and it works really well if you want a tip. But again, would you like another perspective? And then the final one, you all, is being really consistent with your one-on-one meetings. Because as I've coached many organizations and I've worked with culture and organizational structure, what I found is more often than not, we are constantly and chronically rescheduling our one-on-ones. I'm not talking about like the exceptions where we're sick, but it kind of becomes the rule where one-on-ones are chronically rescheduled. And what that happens is it tells people that we don't value them and we don't value their time. Now, there was an organization I'm working with, and we have been trying something out. But when I led this training, one of the women within the training was like, Vitale, I feel really called out. Like, I am always rescheduling my one-on-ones. Like, I feel personally called out and personally attacked by this training right now because I am always rescheduling my one-on-ones. And she's like, it's because other people put meetings on my calendar, right? Like, it's not even something that's really in my control, but organizationally, the organization is not set up to promote trust because, meetings are just constantly going on people's calendars, and then they have to chronically reschedule their one-on-ones. And so what we are testing as a department, there's about 120 people in this department. We've been testing it out for a few months. We're just trying it. But what we have done as a department is we have established Tuesday and Thursday afternoons as one-on-one meeting time for everyone in the department, so that meetings won't get scheduled over that. They've communicated it, obviously, to the other departments that try to schedule meetings in those times. And there are exceptions, right? But it's something that they are doing systemically to build trust so that they can keep those one-on-ones, because they know that one-on-ones and those going well are critical to the people's performance. And it's also critical to psychological safety. So I'd love to hear in the chat box, which of these is your favorite? And then we'll get on to the final part. Yep. Would you like another perspective? Yep, I love that, Amy. You do a gratitude email every morning. That's wonderful. Delegation, practicing empathy. Would you like another perspective? One-on-one meetings, practicing empathy. Awesome. All right, so let's do the final lane of trust. And again, you all, when I'm doing these further deep dives, I've got like 15 to 20 different ways, but we're going with 5 today for each one. So how do we build, again, this is in the same kind of lane as the trust tenets and organizational trust or team or department trust. So this is the ecosystem we're creating. So one of the ways is to establish a common purpose. So I know that organizations have mission, vision, and values, but does your team or department have a common purpose? Or maybe you're about to embark on a all-hands 2-year project. Does that project have a common purpose? And not just establishing a common purpose, but connecting the dots to everyone in your team, like how their role rolls up into that common purpose. Their why behind the common purpose. So that's how you can establish trust. Also normalizing, I don't know, right? That people are allowed in a meeting to not have all the answers, that it's okay to say, that's a really great question, but I don't know the answer to that, but you know what? I'm going to look into it and I'll get back to you by end of day. Just normalizing, I don't know, so that people don't always feel like they have to have the perfect answers all the time in the meetings. Also, making sure there's equal airtime in meetings. Because sometimes we have meetings where there's like the 1 or 2 kind of normal cast of characters that are always speaking, and then the 8 rest of the team members aren't speaking. And so you want to create a space where the 8 people who normally aren't communicating are communicating. And so it may be that you have to have meetings before the meetings to talk to those people and say, hey, you had a really great idea in our one-on-one yesterday. Would you be willing to share? But again, you all, more people sharing in meetings is an indicator of high trust. Also, the more people who share, the higher the collective intelligence. And the higher the collective intelligence, the more innovative you're going to be. Making sure that you're normalizing failure. I do full-on trainings with this, but just wanted to touch on it, just normalizing failure. Four Seasons, the hotel chain, the way that they've started normalizing failure is they use the term glitch as a culture. You're not allowed to say failure, and you're not allowed to say the word mistake. So glitch is a part of their kind of cultural ecosystem. And so that's the word they use when there's a mistake or a failure. It's a glitch. There's another organization that where they open up monthly team meetings by going around and everyone talking about their most recent failure. That's how they normalize failure. So there's different ways to do it. You can have a book or podcast club, again, to talk about things. And then another, like, I love just giving people scripts or questions to think about, but how might we have you considered creates more collaboration and invites in input from the few that may not feel as comfortable communicating. So which of these are your favorite? The common purpose, normalizing failure, normalizing I don't know, the equal airtime. Which ones of these? Yeah, using the word glitch, normalizing failure. So we talked about, you all, again, the why behind trust, why it's important, why it's the piece to the organizational success puzzle. And it's really the most important piece to culture. It's the most important piece to the bottom line. It's not a nice to have, it is a must have. And so we can start building it organizationally or departmentally or as a team by building trust tenets. And then I gave you different ways that you can become a trust catalyst in your organization. And here's all three lanes in case you want to take a picture. I know that this is being recorded, so you can also watch the recording. But what I want to, and I also just want to leave you all with some questions to think about, to take away, like, to your team. Just thinking about what are some of your biggest takeaways around psychological safety and trust. Really start talking about, like, what are the benefits to your team if you have psychological safety and trust? And also, what are some of the actions you can take? So just some reflection questions for you. But to make sure that we stick with time, I have a QR code and I have a PDF of trust building conversation starters for you all if you're interested in it. But what I wanted to leave you with is the term one day or day one. And for anyone who's ever sat in on any of my trainings, you know that it is my character trait, my thing, to end a training with one day or day one. One day or day one. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that each of you are on this call for a reason. There's some piece of today's message that you are meant to take with you, and you can implement it one day, or you can make today your day one. And so I hope that today you make the decision to become a trust catalyst for your organization, put things in place to build trust, and make trust today your day one. So I want to thank you all so much. I'm happy for there to be questions in the chat box or ask any questions in Darla. I'm not sure how you like to close these webinars, but I'd also love to hear any of your biggest takeaways, things that stood out to you. And again, invite you to make today your day one.
There we go. I'm so sorry I couldn't get me to mute. Vitale, thank you so much. I was still taking notes and I was downloading from the QR code. If y'all haven't done that yet, please take a second to do that. Thank you so much for everything that we've been learning today about all the trust tenets. I picked out the ones that I thought would be something not just to use here at work, because we have a really good culture here at Momentum. We're not perfect and we're always growing, but we do a lot of the things because we have learned from Vitale, and we have been adding into our weekly and our quarterly meetings a lot of things that Vitale has already been teaching us. So kudos to you, Vitale, because it's really helped us to be more mindful. You know, you think you're doing great, but there's always room for improvement. I'm going to take what you have been teaching today and even pull it into other situations that I'm in within my community, other groups that I'm a part of, some of them even with my family. So thank you. And I thought that was fun that you mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, everyone, for hopping on today and joining us. I just want to thank you again, Vitale. And if y'all want to know any more about Vitale, please reach out to her. She is also an amazing author, and I ask you to take a look at her book. And congratulations on that. That's a lot of work trying to do everything you're doing and raising a family and also being an author. Thank you. We appreciate that. So
thank you all so much for your time today.
I am going to not do that. I am not. Let me come back over here. That came out. Okay. We just want to let our sponsors thank you so very much for being a part of Momentum. And if there's anything else that you would like to be a part of here with Momentum, please reach out to us on our website. We're momentumleaders.org. We would love to have you be a part of everything that we're doing. And keep in mind that we have a monthly virtual training. Please invite your cohorts and your friends and other people to come in and be a part of this amazing free training. Thank you to our sponsors and to our hosts for donating their time to come here and be with us and lead us. So y'all have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for joining us here at Momentum Leaders.
Momentum's virtual trainings are made possible with the support of Protective Life, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, and America's Thrift. Find the full list of sponsors as well as additional resources for women leaders on our website at momentumleaders.org. Thanks for taking the time to invest in you, and remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel. We love reading thoughts and comments, so you can leave those for us here too. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn by searching at Momentum